Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing more behavior and body language from Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt both pled guilty to felony child abuse after it was discovered that Ruby Franke's children were being severely abused. What we're going to be looking at today is their sentencing. Before we get started with this, I do want to remind you, this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. And in addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. We're going to start by watching Ruby Franke's sentencing.
Mr. Windward.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
So the first thing you probably notice is that she's sitting very upright. That shows a lot of confidence in her body language. Typically, when we're feeling confident, we sit upright, we don't slump. Her nose is upturned a little bit. It looks like she is feeling confident about the way the sentencing is going to go.
A few comments this morning, and the comments my client wishes to make in a few.
And she continues to adjust a little bit, continues to make sure that her posture is good. So she's aware of her appearance. That's something that you also have to consider about this, is that as she's adjusting, she wants to make sure that she appears attentive. And there's nothing bad or critical about that. I just interpret that as being what her body language is saying. There was also something I noticed a second ago. Watch this right here.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So she threw her hair back, which in some ways is to make sure that her face is clear, to make sure that the judge can see her, to make sure that she's presentable. So she's giving a lot of thought to how she's appearing right now.
Good morning. In my few comments this morning, and the comments my client wishes to make in a few minutes, we are not suggesting, nor are we asking that the court deviate from the stipulated sentence contained in the written plea agreement. I want the court to know that through introspection and reflection, Ruby Franke has become a serious student of her own actions.
Now, one thing we're noticing from her that we haven't seen as much in previous hearings is that she's breathing very heavily. We saw that a lot from Jodi Hildebrandt previously, not as much from her. So the weight of this, the stress of this certainly seems to be weighing on her right now.
Reflection, Ruby Franke has become a serious student of her own actions. In the very early days of my involvement with Ruby, she was somewhat defensive, and she was still very much indoctrinated into a philosophy that was destructive. Fortunately, Ruby came to the stark realization of the errors in her thinking patterns. And
she also seems to be aware of the cameras. As you can see, she looked back. Maybe she's looking back at somebody, but I think she was probably looking back at the cameras because she's probably thinking about the fact that she's being recorded right now, that this is being broadcast.
Ruby came to the stark realization of the errors in her thinking patterns and subsequent actions. To say that she was horrified by this realization would be to put it.
So when he said she was horrified, you saw her face turned down a little bit. We see that as somebody losing confidence. Sometimes it can be interpreted as shame. Sometimes it's just a loss of confidence. But there was a shift in how she was feeling when that was said.
Actions. To say that she was horrified by this realization would be to put it mildly. I have marveled at how quickly Ruby abandoned her defensive stance and moved toward her total acceptance of her actions and to her sentence today. So far, she has used her time in jail to unwrap the layers upon layers of deceit and deception foisted upon her over the last 4 years by an unscrupulous individual. Ruby.
So as you can see, her nose is turning red, the bottoms of her mouth are going down. She's clearly getting tearful right now.
Realizes that she still has work to do and shedding.
You saw her lick her teeth just then. We do that as a way to soothe ourselves. We lick our teeth, we touch our lips, we do all of the things around our mouth in order to soothe how we're feeling. So it may be a way to try to hold back tears to some extent.
In those thinking errors, and to reestablish a better and correct pattern of thinking and behavior. Ruby realizes that changing her thinking, reestablishing relationships, and healing are not simple or easy tasks. However, she is committed to doing that work. I would like the court to know that Ruby Franke is a delightful, respectful, and responsible person.
Thank you. I would like to make a statement without any intent to change my stipulated sentence. For the past 4 years, I've chosen to follow counsel and guidance that has led me into a dark delusion.
So when we raise our eyebrows, that's a way to bring attention to our face. I talk about this all the time. And this is hard to see. Obviously, she's obscured by her attorney, but watch where she raises her eyebrows right here.
I've chosen to follow counsel and guidance that has led me into a dark delusion.
So she's saying that she's been led into a dark delusion, that following the guidance is what has led her here.
My distorted version of reality went largely unchecked, as I would isolate from anyone who challenged me. I was led to believe that this world was an evil place, filled with cops who control, hospitals that injure, government agencies that brainwash, church leaders who lie and lust, husbands who refuse to protect, and children who need abused.
So she's typically very articulate, but she was really having a hard time formulating that last part of her sentence. Emotions oftentimes short-circuit the logical parts of our brain. So I think as she was talking about the abuse piece, she was having a hard time actually articulating that in a way that made sense. If you listen right here, it really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Husbands who refuse to protect, and children who need abused. My choice to believe and behave this paranoia culminated into criminal activity for which I stand before you today ready to take accountability. Jodi Hildebrandt was never my business partner, nor was I ever employed by her. I have never received wages from her or connections. Jodi was employed as my son's counselor in 2019, and in 2020 I paid her to be my mentor.
So let me explain what I think is the relevance of what she's saying. So essentially she's saying that she was not the business partner of Jodi Hildebrandt, that she was her counselor, that she was in a position, that Jodi was in a position to where she was supposed to teach her things, that she was supposed to help guide her and tell her what to do. So she had hired her to guide her and tell her what to do, and now she's saying that she helped cause all of these dark delusions. So it's not that she was an equal business partner, that she hired Jodi as someone to be above her and tell her what to do so that she would have influence over her. So I think that's the point she's basically trying to make.
It is important to me to demonstrate my remorse and regret without blame. I take full accountability for my choices. To my babies, my 6 little chicks, you were part of me. I was the mama duck who was consistently watering you to safety. I can see now, over the past 4 years, I was in a deep undercurrent that led us to danger. I would never launch you into darkness knowingly.
So I skipped a bit at this point because basically she was thanking everybody who's been involved in this process, and now she's talking about how, as the mother duck, she led her children to darkness, that she is basically led them into a place that was unhealthy. And in a lot of ways, I do think it sounds like she's blaming Jodi for this. In essence, she's saying that she had bad guidance, and that's ultimately what led to all of the things that happened. She's using strong words like that she engaged in criminal behavior and all of those types of things, but she, in essence, is saying that she wouldn't have made these choices without Jodi. We can only speculate whether or not that's true, but it does seem to be that she is acknowledging that she made these decisions, but is ultimately saying she made these decisions because of Jodi's guidance.
So disoriented that I believed dark was light and light was wrong. I would do anything in this world for you. My willingness to sacrifice all for you was masterfully manipulated into something very ugly. And for my family to heal and for the community to heal, and I understand this is going to take time. I'm committed to continuing my learning until all of my toxic layers are shed, and I am ready to re-enter as a contributing member of our beautiful society.
So something that she's saying here that I actually think is pretty interesting is she's basically saying that she hasn't fully shed all of the toxic layers that she's developed. At least that's how I interpreted what she said, which is more than some people say. Sometimes people say now they know better and there's no looking back and they're ready to re-enter society and they want to get as small a sentence as possible. That may be what she wants, but that's not what she's saying here. She's basically saying that she's still unlearning some of the things she learned. I think that's an interesting point for her to make.
Thank you, Judge Walton.
Thank you for your statement, Ms. Franke. Anything else, Mr. Winward?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else prior to the court imposing sentence?
No, Your Honor.
The sentence will be that Ms. Franke serve 4 counts, 4 1 to 15-year sentences based on her convictions for 4 counts of aggravated child abuse.
So what we don't know at this point is how many specific years she is going to have for each one of those sentences. Minimum number of 4, maximum of 60. Now let's move on to Jodi Hildebrandt.
Recalls the matter of State of Utah versus Hildebrandt, case 231501763. Counsel are present. Ms. Hildebrandt is present.
So one of the things that we already see is that before she sits down, she's licking her lips. That's obviously a sign of stress. That's something we do when we start feeling anxious. She has always appeared more anxious in these hearings than Ruby Franke has.
It would be repetitive. I had the same statement just with the last few paragraphs where I was differentiating between Ms. Franke and Ms. Hildebrandt.
Okay, let's talk about housekeeping matters first. What about restitution?
We've stipulated to keep that open for 8 months.
It is appropriate, Your Honor, since we don't have any evidence with...
Jodi Hildebrandt's default look is one of much more tension, a lot more fear than Ruby Franke.
The State of Utah respectfully requests that the court sentence Ms. Hildebrandt to consecutive prison terms for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse to which she has pleaded guilty. The sentence was agreed to her in her plea agreement and is also recommended by...
Not surprisingly, you're seeing her blinking excessively. We typically do this when we're feeling lots of stress. He's obviously asking for 4 consecutive sentences. She probably didn't hear Ruby Franke that had just received 4 consecutive sentences, but even hearing that is stressful, as I think it would probably be for anyone.
The sentence was agreed to her in her plea agreement and is also recommended by adult probation and parole. Ms. Hildebrandt committed awful acts of child abuse. From May to August 2023, she and her business partner held 2 children, ages 9 and 11, turning 12, in a concentration camp-like setting in her house in Ivan City.
You can see when he said a concentration camp-like setting, you saw her swallow right then. We typically do that when we're feeling heightened levels of stress. So even though the baseline right now is high stress, when there's certain things that really hit you, people need to take that swallow. You're also seeing her breathe pretty heavily. That's also something that we've noticed in previous hearings.
12, in a concentration camp-like setting in her house in Ivan City. The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment. They were isolated from others and were hidden when people came to visit the house. They were forced to do physical tasks like carrying loaded boxes up and down stairs and doing wall sits or sitting against a wall without assistance of a chair or stool for hours at a time.
And you can see how still she's sitting when she's having to sit and endure this and listen to them talk about all of the things that she did, preparing to get sentenced for all of this. She's not moving, not even in small, comfortable ways. She's just sitting very still. This is the freeze, flight, or fight response. She is freezing right now. It's a desire to hide. Obviously, she knows she can't hide in a literal sense, but the feeling of wanting to hide because of what is impending, because there is danger coming, is very strong, it seems like.
Against a wall without assistance of a chair or stool for hours at a time. They were forced to do manual labor outdoors in the extreme summer heat, often without shoes or socks. They were also forced to stand outside on a cement patio in the summer heat for hours and even days. They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot after he attempted to run away in mid-July. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization to treat. The injuries from the binding are particularly bad. In addition to the physical abuse, the children were emotionally abused. They each believed to some degree that they deserved what was being done to them. Had the older of the 2 children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police.
And there was another one of those big swallows when the attorney is talking about points about this that are particularly bad. That's when you can see the feelings coming through, even though she's really hiding the vast majority of feelings that she's experiencing right now. But clearly, because of her breathing, because of the way that she's looking, clearly she's feeling something, but it does seem to be that she's just trying to hide and sit still.
The older of the 2 children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police. Heaven only knows how much longer he could have survived. After being caught, Ms. Hildebrandt has shown little to no remorse for her actions. In telephone conversations that will be provided in full to the Board of Pardons and Parole, and which she knew to be recorded, she's repeatedly claimed that she is the victim and the children are the perpetrators. She has gone so far as to say that the things said in this proceeding and covered by the media today will be full of lies. The combination of three factors make Ms. Hildebrandt a significant threat to the community. First, the severity of the abuse she caused to be inflicted on young children. Second, her attitude that everything she did was justified and that she is being...
You just keep seeing that heavy breathing. If you think about somebody who has perpetrated the kind of abuse that she has acknowledged, not that she's been accused of, but she has admitted to, the amount of power and control somebody has to want to do those types of things, to look at her right now when she has zero control. She has no control over this situation. The only control she had was whether or not she wanted to agree to plead guilty, and that is something that was within her control. But none of the things happening today are within her control, and you just have to imagine what it's like for somebody that wants that much control, that's inflicted that much control on other people, having to sit and have no control over any of this. And that's why I think that she's sitting so remarkably still.
Wrongfully imprisoned. And third, her training as a therapist and aptitude for using online resources to convince others to follow her guidance. Utah Code Section 76-3401 lays out three factors the court should consider in determining whether to impose concurrent or consecutive sentences. The first is the gravity and circumstances of the offense.
It's interesting to see how hard she's trying not to move. I already talked about how that freeze, flight, fight mechanism is in there. But even like when she's swallowing, she's not making normal facial movements that people do when they swallow. She is just staying remarkably still and trying to show as little as humanly possible, so it seems.
The state respectfully requests that she be sentenced to 4 consecutive terms.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Terry?
Thank you, Your Honor. I will be brief. As is always.
So if you compare her with Ruby Franke, if you look at the difference in how they are, Ruby Franke seems a little bit more natural. Jodi Hildebrandt just seems terrified right now. She seems too terrified to even move. Even when her attorney stood up, her head just barely moved, just enough to look at him.
I will be brief today, and she has a brief statement that she wants to read, Your Honor.
Okay.
And
all right. Ms. Hildebrandt? Go ahead.
I sincerely love these children.
Now, this is my own feeling here. I'm not trying to say this is objective by any stretch of the imagination. But when I hear her say that, when I hear her start it with, I genuinely love these children, it still immediately makes me think that she still thinks that the choices that she made were in the best interest of them, or that it was out of love. My immediate reaction to that is not a positive one.
Sincerely love these children. I desire for them to heal physically and emotionally. One of the reasons I did not go to trial is that I did not want them to emotionally relive the experience which would have been detrimental to them. My hope and prayer is that they will heal and move forward to have beautiful lives. I am willing to submit to what the state feels would be an appropriate amount of time served to make retribution as an outcome.
So in essence, she's basically saying that she hopes the children get well physically and mentally, but she didn't talk at all about her role in any of that. She didn't acknowledge what she did. She's basically saying she cares about them and she wishes them well and she hopes that they get well. But in no part of that did she acknowledge what she did or the role that she played in what happened.
And in answer to your question, Your Honor, I knew that whatever she might say to the author of the pre-sentence report would probably sound hollow and self-serving, and perhaps it does today. But I know that my client, in the statement that she makes to the court today, that statement is absolutely sincere.
Does Ms. Hildebrandt recognize that it's her behavior that caused the harm to the children that she's referred to?
Okay, so apparently the judge thought of it the same way.
Her statement?
Your Honor, she recognizes that she was, along with Ms. Franke, that she made decisions with respect to the discipline of those children that were wrong, that caused harm to those children.
I'm not sure that I would use the word discipline. The children were tortured. They were abused. To disguise that as discipline, even still, I think does it a disservice, frankly.
She fully recognizes that and accepts responsibility for that.
All right. Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. What happened to these children and your philosophy in dealing with them, frankly, seems detached from reality or any objective standard of decency or even common sense. And the court finds that it is appropriate that you serve a prison sentence. The court finds under the statute, Utah Code 76-3-401, that given the gravity and circumstances of the offenses, the number of victims, and the history and character and needs of the defendant, that consecutive sentences are appropriate. The court imposes 4 1 to 15-year sentences to be, again, served consecutively for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. The last thing I do need to tell you is that you only have 30 days to file or perfect an appeal of any error of the court by filing a written notice of appeal with the clerk of the court.
So there you have it. 4 years to 60 years for both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. 4 consecutive sentences. I guess we'll see how many years they ultimately have to serve of each of those, but they do have 4 back-to-back sentences. So what did we see today in Ruby Franke? Well, we saw somebody who was a little bit more engaged. She obviously talked a lot more, but she typically is more engaged. That's more her personality. She's somebody who tries to connect with people. That's what she uses to navigate the world. So it's not surprising that we did see her interact with people a little bit more. We did see more emotion from her. We did see her talk more. She had more to say. And she also blamed a lot of her behavior on Jodi Hildebrandt. Even though she acknowledged that she made decisions, she essentially was saying that Jodi Hildebrandt is the reason she made these decisions, the bad guidance of Jodi Hildebrandt, that she had dark delusions because of her interactions with Jodi Hildebrandt. Jodi Hildebrandt, on the other hand, had very little to say, and body language-wise, we saw almost nothing. She sat like a statue for the vast majority of the sentencing hearings. What we didn't notice from Jodi Hildebrandt's statement was much regarding what she actually did, or any real acknowledgement that she is the one that inflicted this harm. Hopefully this video has helped you better understand some of the behavior and the body language that we observed today. If you have any other thoughts or there's any other videos you want me to analyze, as always, please let me know in the comments below. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.